Alright guys, so we're out here checking out the Haoqi Cheetah. This is a 750 watt hub motor bike with a built-in 16 amp hour battery, 48 volts. And this one comes with an extra 9 amp hour battery to add on to give you a total of 25 amp hours. I don't have it on this bike right now, and we'll talk more about that later. But it's a full suspension, sort of mountain bike style bike. You can see it's kind of a mid-step right here, pretty high seat post here. And it comes with a back rack on, as you can see. But overall, this is a really cool looking bike. But I wanted to do a little bit more of an update video on this because I do have an unboxing video, and you can check that out if you haven't yet. It's a pretty good bike so far. It's not perfect, and again, we'll talk about that when we get this thing out on a ride. But I do like how this bike looks. I think it looks really cool and everything. It's got the nice rear suspension on there. In the middle here, we have our built-in 16 amp hour battery with our tray for our 9 amp hour 48 volt battery there. And then you have a little charging port down here, and you can just take this on and off the bike with the key, and obviously you can charge on the bike. And here, even though it looks like a mid-drive, this is just a cadence sensor rear hub motor bike, and that's just the controller box there. You can see we've got our pedals down here. This is a full suspension bike, so you can see we have our shock here in the middle. You have some 180 millimeter rear Gamma branded hydraulic brakes here. 2 piston, of course. As far as our hub motor goes, it's a Banks 750 watt motor. I'm not sure what the peak is on this bike, but I've really never seen this thing pull more than 500 watts here on the display. And you've got a rear tail light here, which also does act as a brake light. No turn signals on this bike. You've got a nice rear rack here that's bolted down on the frame. It's not like a full-size one, but it is nice to have that in case you do want to take this bike out and carry some cargo with it. But on the back here, you have a fairly decent padded seat. It's not the most comfortable in the world. It's actually pretty darn firm. And then you have your matte black paint here, which looks really good. The welds and everything on this frame do look pretty nice on here. This bike weighs about 77-ish pounds with the battery. With this battery and everything, I'm not sure with the other battery. Probably adds another couple pounds on there, but overall not a super heavy, but also not a super light bike, since this is an electric bike. Obviously, this is a really big bike. I think that this bike is made for a taller person, and like you guys saw, I've taken this thing about 23 miles, and I've kind of come to the conclusion that this bike probably isn't for me necessarily, for a few different reasons. But let's go get this thing out on a ride, and I'll talk more about how this thing rides and what I mean by when I say that it's not necessarily for me. So let's go get this Haoqi Cheetah out on the road and see how it is. All right guys, so we're making our way down here on this hill on the Haoqi Cheetah, and I just want to show you guys how this thing is off-road. Now, downhill, off-road, no problem. You know, obviously we're going downhill, so you don't need any power to do that. I'm going to show you guys how it goes up the hill right now, but the suspension on this bike, I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, it is just not the most comfortable. And I'm going to go up this hill right now and show you guys how it does. And on throttle only right now, we're on pedal assist 5, and we're pulling like less than 500 watts on here. I'm not sure what the deal is with that. I'm not sure if there's something up with the motor or what, but I've never really seen it pull over 500-600 watts on this. And it's a 750 watt motor. I'm not sure if it's a 750 watt peak motor or if that's its nominal rating, but usually if it says 750 watts, that means that it'll pull more, but its nominal rating, like what it's rated for, is 750 watts. I don't know what's up with that, but I mean, it got us up this hill fine, and we're going over this rough terrain, and it handles it fine, but the suspension just isn't really that great, as you can hear in my voice. Honestly, this feels pretty much like a hardtail. This rear suspension just does not articulate much for me, and it's really disappointing because this should be a pretty comfortable frame on here, but it just doesn't do it for me. I don't know what it is with the rear suspension. It's just not compressing for me. As far as I know, this is a non-adjustable shock. I'm assuming it's a spring, a fixed rate and everything, so the rear suspension on here is just not for me. So obviously this is a bike that you're going to be wanting to pedal, and you're in this sort of mountain bike, more hunched over type of position, a good position where you can get some good power going and down on the pedals on this bike. So I'm just going to pedal it a little bit here. I'm in top gear on pedal assist 5, and this is a cadence sensor from what I can tell. I think that this just gives you like a speed limit when you're in the different pedal assist numbers. Like if we lower it down, you can see we're getting less power here, but I think that's what the pedal assist levels mean on this bike. Overall, I'm in top gear right now, and I'm pedaling, and I'm almost ghost pedaling here at about 20, so the gearing on this bike is pretty short. You might want to keep it in, you might have to be at lower speeds in order to be putting any power down to the pedals, but I think that if you're going to be on like mountain trails and stuff and kind of off-roading like this bike is sort of like, this frame is sort of designed for. I think it should be perfectly fine as far as the gearing and everything. And to this bike's credit, it's more than enough power off-road when you're pedaling this thing. It's not the most powerful when you're just using it throttle only, but you know, this bike is definitely perfectly capable of going off-road, especially since it has its fat tires and everything. And it is technically full suspension, but like I said, that rear spring just does not do anything for me. I weigh about 150 pounds. I'm just sort of standing up right now just to sort of be a little bit more comfortable here. Oh my goodness, this thing is bumpy. So I was really surprised when I got on this bike at first, and it just was so rough on the rear here. I really was expecting more of this full suspension on this bike, but it just, I don't know what it is. It just doesn't do it for me. I don't think that I'm heavy enough. The front suspension, you get some travel from, but the rear suspension just, I don't know if I'm too light for it. As far as the brakes on here, they're good. They're Gamma branded. They get you to a stop real nice, pretty quick. Not the absolute best brakes I've ever felt on an e-bike. They're sort of mid-range and more than adequate, but they're really good, and they'll get you to a good stop nice and quickly and safely. Should be pretty easy to maintain and find parts for too when you do wear out the pads. So let's use those brakes to get us to a stop and go to a 0 to 20 test. From an absolute dig, we're gonna go now to 20 miles an hour. We'll see what reads out first, the computer or the phone. And 20, right there, calling it on the GPS. So this is not a bike that's gonna throw you off of the back. And I don't know if you can read this screen, but it really never got above 600 watts right there when we were pulling it. And the reading's kind of all over the place. So again, I'm not really sure what was going on with this this battery and everything, or with the controller, but it doesn't seem like it wants to pull its full 750 watts, which is kind of disappointing. But you're not really expecting this to be a super powerful, like, speed demon type of bike. So the screen on here is pretty basic. It's nothing crazy, and I can see it perfectly fine here in the daylight. It's nice and bright. It just gives you the battery bar, your speed, pedal assist number, it pulls how many watts you're pulling, and then it shows you an odometer here. Then you also have a trip computer on there, and you have a timer. I am disappointed that they don't have the voltage reading on here, because I really like when bikes do that, because then you can actually see how much of the battery is left. Because sometimes these like the battery bars lie and stuff, and they're just not accurate. So we're gonna see how well this thing can climb hills here. I'm not expecting anything crazy out of this, but I am gonna shift into a lower gear, probably the lowest gear possible here. And we're gonna go down. I'm gonna be in pedal assist 5. These hydraulic brakes are keeping us nice and steady on that decline there. So there's no way I'm gonna get this on throttle only, so I'm gonna have to pedal this. So I'm gonna start pedaling at the bottom and standing up, putting a lot of power down, made it up that hill. This is not a hill climber bike, it's not a torque monster bike, but I guess worst case scenario, you can get up a hill, especially if you're pedaling here. We've already demonstrated that it's more than capable of going off-road and everything. But you know, just on some light grass trails like this, it's perfectly fine. If it had better rear suspension, I would say the ride would be really, really good on this bike. But since it doesn't really have the best rear suspension, you know, it really seems like it only absorbs like the hardest of bumps on the back there. I feel the front working, but the back really just doesn't iron out the little bumps. It really only irons out those rough bumps. So like I showed you guys earlier, this version of this bike does accept 2 batteries and everything wired into the controller. There is a base model one without the second battery, but they did send me this one that has 2 batteries on here. And I actually noticed that the battery, the second battery, the little one that I showed you guys in the unboxing video, wasn't working on this bike for whatever reason. And you know, I tried to charge it and everything, and I actually left it on the bike with the main battery unplugged just to see if there was any power going to it, and it wasn't able to power up the bike. And when I would put it on the charger, the light would stay green, it wouldn't turn red like it was charging. So I don't know what was up with that battery, but I ended up reaching out to the representative that contacted me to send me the bike, and he told me that I could send it back to the factory and that they would get it fixed and everything. And they very well may be working on getting it fixed, but this was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago now that I sent the battery and everything back to them, and I haven't heard anything about getting that second battery back to me. But it was kind of frustrating because the whole kind of shtick of this bike and getting the upgraded model is that second battery, and the second battery wasn't working out of the box, and I haven't gotten another one back. So you know, that was frustrating. That was something that I had to deal with this bike. I didn't really talk about it much in the unboxing because I wasn't sure if they were going to send me out another one quickly, but I can't sit here and wait around for them to send me another battery when I'm making these videos. So as of now, this is a single battery bike, and a 16 amp hour battery is perfectly adequate for this style of bike, and I think this is a perfectly fine battery, to be fair. But it is disappointing that I don't have that second battery on here, which is a feature that this bike comes with, but obviously I can't use it right now, so kind of disappointing. So anyways, guys, riding this bike around on here, it's a fairly comfortable ride besides the rear suspension being a little bit rough. I think that this is a good bike for mainly city riding. I would say you can off-road it, especially if you change out that rear suspension and get it a little more comfortable. But I think this is something that totally can tackle trails, bike trails, on the road, all that type of stuff. And that rear rack is really nice to have that extra practicality on there. Allows you to carry a backpack or a bag back there and tie it down. Riding position isn't my favorite as far as just riding around town on this, because you are hunched over pretty aggressively and you're in an aggressive stance, which is good for getting power down when you're on a trail and you need a lot of torque when you're pedaling. But for just riding around town, it's not the most comfortable. If I had some handlebars that were up here, that would be a little bit better, but just as it is right now, just hunched over like this, it's not the most comfortable riding position. It's not ideal for me. So the frame on this bike is actually pretty big, like I was saying earlier. And I think that if you're a bigger rider, this is gonna be a really good bike for you. I think if you want like an off-road bike that you can put a lot of power down and you're a taller rider, like this is gonna be a good bike for you. You can adjust that seat post really high and everything. You can get a good pedal stroke in and put a lot of torque down to the pedals. And especially with that hub motor, you're gonna get a lot of assist and everything. But if you're a smaller person, I definitely wouldn't recommend this bike. Like if you're under 5'5" or something, this is a pretty big bike. I'm pretty high up on this thing, and I adjusted the seat and everything to my preference, but it's a really comfortable bike to pedal and everything. And that's really what I think this bike's main thing is pedaling. It does have a throttle and everything, and it's got a really nice smooth throttle on here. The power is delivered really nice and smooth, but I think this is more of a bike for somebody to pedal around and have fun that way on. It's not necessarily the best throttle bike. I think you got a lot of other options if you want a bike that's more of a throttle bike. And just out here on the streets of the suburbs, this is a perfectly comfortable bike. We're on relatively smooth roads here, and there's no bumps to be absorbed. That rear suspension doesn't need to work very hard, and it's just a really nice ride on the streets. Sometimes that aggressive front kind of hanging over riding position is kind of nice. It makes you feel a little bit more powerful and confident. The handling for a 26-inch fat tire bike is nice. And it is nice to have this rear view mirror down here to see behind me when you're on the street and everything. Like I said, they did send me that separate. I'm not sure if they shipped that with the bike or not, but it did come separate from the bike. But overall, I've put about 27, 28 miles on this bike so far. It's been a really good bike. I mean, I haven't really had any issues with it. 30 miles isn't really anything crazy for a bike. I've had bikes that I put over, 700, 800 miles on. So, I mean, the first 30 miles, I think any problems that you're gonna have are probably gonna come to the surface pretty quickly. But I haven't really had any problems with this bike besides that battery, but that was just right out of the box. It wasn't working. So, I don't know, hopefully that gets fixed and everything. And I don't think that should necessarily deter you from getting this bike if you are interested in something like this, because I've seen a lot of reviews on this bike and it generally is a good bike. I was just really disappointed with that battery not working out of the box. Also, like I was saying earlier, the seat is not the most comfortable on this bike. It's pretty rough. It's weird because it feels padded, but when I'm actually sitting on it, it's not very padded. It feels like it's just a solid piece of like plastic almost. It's a little bit padded, but it's firm. It's a hard seat. So I guess we'll do a top speed run on throttle only here. We've got indicated about half battery, a little over half battery here, and we're not getting over 21 on this. I did unlock the top speed on this bike. It's a weird procedure on this bike. You can Google it if you do have this bike, but you have to like press this brake lever down 5 times when you start the bike up. It's strange. I have gotten this bike up to about 26 miles an hour, and right now we're only going 21, and we have a little over half battery here. So again, not a speed demon bike. And for the price, there's definitely a lot of bikes that are going to go faster for this price or cheaper. As far as range goes, they claim 65 miles plus on the Haoqi website, which I think you could get if you were in like pedal assist 1 or 2 and doing a lot of work. But if you're just going to be pedal or throttle only on this bike, I would say you're probably going to get 22 miles if you're on that 16 amp hour battery. You'll probably get another 8 to 10 miles out of that little battery there. So overall, not bad range. It's pretty average, what you'd expect for the amount of, for the size of the battery on this bike. Just went up a bump right there, and this seat is actually kind of uncomfortable right now. I definitely, if I bought this thing, I would switch this seat out for sure. I'd switch this seat out, and I would switch this spring out on the rear. I mean, you can even hear my voice. I'm shaking around a little bit here on these bumps. Overall, I just don't think that this bike is for me. I think that this bike is for a bigger rider and somebody who really wants more of a mountain bike style bike. I prefer the moped style bikes or something like the Wired Freedom that's, you know, a fast sort of 26-inch bike, kind of like this. If you're in the market for a big 26-inch mountain bike like this, and you do want to pedal a lot, and you want something that's relatively powerful and can go uphill and off trails and stuff, I think this is a perfectly good option. And they are running sales on this bike right now. It is November 2024, so they got Black Friday sales and stuff going on. I think you can get it for like around $1,000 to $1,200, again, depending on the configuration and if you got the dual battery version or not. If you can pick this bike up for around $1,000, $1,200, I think that this is a perfectly good bike. I think it feels really high quality. I think the frame is really sturdy and everything. Welds look nice, paint looks nice. The display leaves a little bit to be desired here. It's kind of basic. The brakes are really, really good on this bike. The grips feel very comfortable, and this is a good bike if you're going to be pedaling it, you know, going off-road and everything. You can put a lot of power down. I wish it did have a horn. You get this bell right here, but you know, I wish it did have a horn. Most e-bikes do have a horn, especially at this price point. Things I like about this bike are this bike's throttle. It's really smooth, easy power delivery. The controller on here does a good job of giving you a nice even power delivery. I also really like the Gemma brakes on this bike. I think they will last you a long time, and they're really powerful and strong. I actually like the front suspension on this bike. It's nice and smooth and soft. The rear suspension is not my favorite on this. It's actually quite firm and makes this bike feel a lot more like a hardtail bike. The pedaling experience on this bike is nice. You throw it in 7th gear and you know, you're going 20 miles an hour and you're just kind of riding along really nicely. It feels nice and smooth. I actually want to see how fast I can get going with me pedaling it. It seems like we're maxing out here at about 20 miles an hour on pedals. It doesn't want to give me any more power. And with both hands on the handlebars, it does track nice and straight, but when you take your hands off the handlebars, you can see we get the sort of death wobble that you get with the Wired Freedom there, which is kind of disappointing. So who do I think is going to buy the Haoqi Cheetah? What type of person would I recommend this to? Well, if you're a bigger guy, first and foremost, I definitely recommend this bike to you, and especially if you're looking for something that's like a mountain bike style bike, you want to be able to pedal it, you want to put some good power down on trails and everything. I think that this is a great option if you want to do that. Obviously, you have really good range, especially when you have that second battery on the frame here. You've got really amazing brakes, so you know, if you're going to be abusing the brakes and everything and going off challenging trails and using your brakes a lot, it's going to be good. We just crossed over 30 miles here on the Cheetah. I like the frame and the look and everything on this bike. I think it's really good, and I think that the quality and everything on it is going to be perfectly fine for everyday use, and I think that you really can abuse this bike and use it every day. And this could be like your daily driver, commuter type bike, and it's gonna last you. There's some things that I don't really care for about this bike is the riding position. I am hunched over, the handlebars are kind of wide, so you're in a good position for pedaling, but it's not the most comfortable for just cruising around, and I tend to just cruise around on these bikes, so for me the riding position isn't the best. I do not like the rear suspension on this bike. It just doesn't really do anything on this bike. It might as well be a hardtail, unfortunately, and I hate to be hard on it, but it really is just, it's like a hardtail bike. Obviously I had the issue with the battery on this bike, on that second battery I should say. Hopefully that gets solved, and hopefully you can go through Haoqi's warranty and customer service and everything, and they'll be able to help you out. But it's disappointing that the battery just was dead out of the box and it wasn't working. But overall, I think that this is a good bike, and I think that for that $1,000 to $1,200 price point, I think that this is a good buy and it is a good pickup. I think if you do pick this thing up and you're a bigger person and you want a bike that you can take off-road and that you can pedal and everything and do all that type of stuff, I think you're going to be real happy with a bike like this. But if you're a smaller person or you're looking for a bike that's like a more comfortable cruiser type of bike, I don't think that this bike is for you, and I think you are going to be disappointed if you get it for those reasons. The Haoqi Cheetah, it's not a bike for me. Is it for you? Well, if you can say yes to any of those things, if you are a bigger person and you do want to pedal this thing, I think it could be a real good bike and a real good option for you. We'll flip around right here and head back to the Bat Cave. But overall, guys, if you do want to check this bike out and you do want to see their Black Friday sale that they're having right now in November 2024, I will leave the link in the description and in the pinned comment for you guys to go check out. I want to thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the channel. If this bike isn't your thing, then you can go ahead and check out the other videos on my channel that I have linked in the description. Check out a lot of different stuff, from moped style bikes to mountain bikes like this to even some scooters. So you can go check those other videos out. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.